The forest was silent that night, except for the sound of rain whispering against the leaves. The moonlight broke through the trees in pale slivers, catching the faint shiver of a small, muddy creature hiding beneath a fallen branch. A wolf pup, alone, its eyes wide with fear and confusion, tiny chest trembling with every drop that fell. Somewhere in the distance, the echo of howls, familiar voices fading further away, was swallowed by the storm. He was only a few weeks old when his pack vanished. Maybe they had been hunted. Maybe they had left, believing he wouldn't survive. The forest can be cruel to the weak. But sometimes, fate has strange ways of writing second chances. It was past midnight when a man named David pulled his old truck over by the forest road. The headlights cut through the fog like two tired eyes. He had been driving for hours, heading home from a failed camping trip that had turned into a stormy disaster. His clothes were damp, his mood worse. Then he heard it, a faint cry, thin, broken, like a child's whimper swallowed by the rain. He froze. At first, he thought it was the wind, but it came again, louder this time. David grabbed his flashlight and stepped out, boots sinking into the mud. The sound pulled him toward the tree-line, where the light caught a pair of glowing eyes staring back at him. He knelt slowly. "Hey there, little one," he murmured, voice soft as the rain. The pup flinched, trying to back away but too weak to move. Its fur was matted with mud, paws scraped raw, ribs visible under the skin. David's heart clenched. He reached out his hand, keeping it steady in the cold air. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The pup didn't run. It just stared, trembling. Then, as if some small instinct recognized something kind in that human voice, it took one step forward and collapsed. David caught it before it hit the ground. Inside the truck, the heater hummed weakly. David wrapped the tiny wolf in his camping blanket. Steam rose from its soaked fur, its eyes barely open. "You're just a baby," he whispered. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The pup didn't answer, of course. But in that quiet cab, as thunder rolled outside, something passed between them, a kind of unspoken promise. By the time they reached David's small cabin on the edge of town, the pup had fallen asleep on the seat beside him, one paw resting on his arm. The next morning, the world outside was washed clean. The storm had left behind puddles that mirrored the dawn sky. David moved gently through his kitchen, warming milk on the stove. The pup, now dry, wrapped in an old towel, lifted his head weakly when he came over. "Hungry?" David smiled. "Yeah, I thought so." He poured the milk into a small bowl and watched as the pup hesitated, sniffed, then began to drink with quiet urgency. He laughed softly. "Guess you're tougher than you look." Days passed. The pup started to stand, then walk, then follow. At first, it stayed close only when David fed it, always cautious. But soon, he found it waiting by the door every morning, tail twitching, ready to explore. David named him Shadow, because he followed him everywhere. The name fit. Shadow was no ordinary wolf pup. He had a curious calmness in his gaze, an intelligence that made him seem older than his small body allowed. When David spoke, Shadow tilted his head as if listening. When David was quiet, Shadow sat beside him, content just to exist in the same stillness. But not everyone saw it that way. When David took Shadow to the local vet, a woman in the waiting room gasped. "That's not a dog, is it?" she whispered. The vet frowned too. "He's wild, David. A wolf. You can't keep him." David sighed. "If I hadn't found him, he'd be dead. Isn't that worth something?" The vet shook her head. "Wolves belong in the wild. It's not safe for you or for him." That night, David sat by the fire, staring at Shadow sleeping near the hearth. The flames flickered across the pup's fur, turning it gold. He reached down, brushing a hand through the soft fur. "They think I shouldn't keep you," he said quietly. "Maybe they're right." Shadow stirred, lifting his head. His eyes met David's, steady, bright, trusting. And in that moment, David realized something. This wasn't just an animal he'd rescued. This was a life that had chosen him back. Outside, the forest whispered in the dark. Somewhere in that vast wilderness, Shadow's old world waited. Untamed, dangerous, calling. But here, by the firelight, Another world was forming. Fragile, unexpected, real. David leaned back, exhaling softly. "All right, little wolf," he said. "We'll figure out together." But as peaceful as that moment was, the world beyond the cabin was changing. Hunters had been spotted nearby, and word had already spread that someone was keeping a wolf cub in town. The storm that would test their bond was only just beginning. The morning sun spilled to the windows, painting the cabin in soft amber light. David rubbed the sleep from his eyes, only to find Shadow staring out the window, ears perked, body tense. The forest beyond looked calm, but David knew that look. Instinct. He stepped outside, the cold biting against his skin. Faint tracks ran along the muddy edge of his yard. Boot prints, not paw prints. Hunters. A knot formed in his chest. He went back inside and knelt beside Shadow. "We might have company soon," he said quietly. "People who won't understand." Shadow tilted his head, as if sensing the weight in David's voice. That afternoon, David went into town to buy supplies. He kept his trip short, avoiding questions, but word spreads fast in small towns. 2 men in camo jackets were leaning by their truck when he came out of the store. "Hey, you're the guy keeping that wolf pup, right?" One asked, voice sharp. David paused. "He's not hurting anyone." The other smirked. "Not yet, but give it time. A wild thing still wild." David didn't answer. He drove home with his jaw tight, hands gripping the wheel. Inside, Shadow ran to greet him, tail wagging slightly, unaware of the storm gathering around them. That evening, rain returned. A quiet drizzle this time. David built a fire, hoping the sound would calm him. But Shadow wouldn't rest. He kept pacing by the door, nose twitching at the scent of something beyond the woodline. Then came the gunshot. David jumped. Shadow flinched, growling low. He grabbed his flashlight and opened the door. The rain thickened into sheets as he ran into the dark. "Hello? Who's out there?" he shouted. No reply, just the echo of another shot, further away. David turned back, heart pounding, but when he reached the cabin, Shadow was gone. Panic clawed through him. He searched through the night, calling the pup's name until his throat ached. The forest swallowed every sound. Branches whipped his arms, mud soaked his boots, but he didn't stop. Shadow. At dawn, he finally found signs. Tiny paw prints in the mud leading toward the ridge. He followed them, voice cracking with hope. "Come on, buddy, please." Then, in a clearing, he saw a movement. Shadow, backed into a corner, tail low, teeth bared. 3 hunters stood before him, rifles aimed. "Step away," David shouted, running forward. "Don't shoot." One man turned, startled. "He's a wolf." "He's a pup." David barked back, placing himself between them. "He's not dangerous." The hunter hesitated, lowering his gun slightly, but another didn't. He aimed again, finger tightening. Before David could move, Shadow did. The pup leapt in front of him, growling fiercely. The sound wasn't fear, it was defiance. A small body standing against men with guns. "Stop!" David screamed. The gun fired. A sharp cry split the air. Shadow collapsed. For a moment, the forest fell silent again, like the world itself was holding its breath. David dropped to his knees, pulling Shadow into his arms. "No, no, no, stay with me, buddy." Blood stained his hands, hot and unreal. The hunters stared, guilt frozen on their faces. He jumped in front of me," one stammered. David looked up, tears cutting through the rain. "Get out." His voice shook, not with weakness but fury. "Get out of here before I make you." They left, wordless, boots crunching away into the trees. David pressed his coat against the wound, whispering, "You're okay, Shadow. You're going to be okay." The pup blinked weakly, his breathing shallow. He didn't whimper, didn't cry, just looked at David with eyes full of something achingly human. Hours passed before they reached the vet. She worked silently, urgently. David sat outside the room, drenched, still trembling. Every sound, the clink of tools, the beeping monitor, cut through him. When she came out, her expression said everything. "He's alive," she said softly. "Barely, But if anyone can pull through, it's him. David nodded, relief washing over him like a wave that almost hurts. He pressed a hand to his face, whispering, "Good boy." Weeks turned into months. Shadow healed slowly, his limp fading with time. David stayed by his side through every sleepless night. When Shadow took his first steps again, David laughed and cried at once. But the world hadn't forgotten. Wildlife officers came knocking, papers in hand. "Mr. Carter," one said, "you can't keep him. He needs to be released." David's throat tightened. He won't survive out there. He's not just some wild animal anymore. The officer's eyes softened. "Then give him a chance to prove you wrong." That night, David sat by the fire again, Shadow lying beside him. "They want to take you back to the wild," he said quietly. "Maybe that's where you belong." Shadow looked up, as of understanding. He nuzzled David's hand, licking the scar on his knuckles from that night in the woods. It felt like goodbye. The next morning, the forest was still. They walked together to the ridge where it all began. Sunlight spilled through the trees, painting everything gold. David knelt, unclipping the collar around Shadow's neck. "Go on, boy," he said, voice breaking. "You're free now." For a long moment, Shadow didn't move. He just stared at David, the man who had become his world. Then, slowly, he turned and padded toward the trees. At the edge of the forest, Shadow stopped and looked back one last time. Their eyes met. No words, no sound, just that invisible thread between two souls who had found each other when they both were lost. Then he vanished into the trees. Months later, David still walked that ridge sometimes. The forest felt quieter now, lonelier. But one morning, as he stood watching the sunrise, a familiar shape appeared in the distance, a gray shadow moving through the mist. A grown wolf, strong and proud, stopped at the edge of the clearing. For a heartbeat, David forgot to breathe. Shadow lifted his head and howled. It wasn't a sound of pain this time. It was a song of home. David smiled through his tears. "Good boy," he whispered. "You made it." And for the first time in a long time,